Hello, everyone. This is Lala, and today I'm continuing my veteran slash returning player privilege series. And today I'm going to discuss Big Brother 14. Obviously, I did the conceptual intro video to this, and I discussed Big Brother 11 in addition to Big Brother 13. So you can check those out. So, before we get into the actual season, we should break down why CBS decided to do a mixed season right after they did one in the last season and year. Well, the most obvious reason to me is the fact that Big Brother 13 was a ratings goldmine, and they wanted to replicate those ratings, which obviously makes sense when you are a company and your product did well, you're going to do anything to get your next product to have similar or better results as your last successful product. I also discussed in the last video that Big Brother 7, a full returnee season, was not a ratings juggernaut, especially compared to the increasing appearance fees that they had to do for the 14 house guests of that season. And Big Brother 13 also did better in the ratings than Big Brother 7. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I also think that CBS knew that the second era, which is the post-classic era that is now titled from Big Brother 8 to Big Brother 15, was also coming to a close. And this was a way to do it without doing a full returnee season, which they did with the classic era with Big Brother 7. Also saw that they could cast newbies who are very weak in personality, who are very easily manipulated either by production, the returning house guests, or both, and newbies who in general really aren't familiar with Big Brother in general and would need consistent assistance and a leader to direct them to do what they need to do. So they saw that on Big Brother 13, and they continued that here with Big Brother 14, where I have stated that I think this is the weakest newbie cast ever, partially due to all of the elements here. And them just really letting the coaches just tell them what to do and run their game completely without having much identity. Now it is time to actually talk about the actual returnees of the season. So when you look at the four that came back, Britney was from the 2-year-old Big Brother 12 and benefited from recency bias the most, since her season was the most recent, and usually with Big Brother house guests from a particular season, they usually have a 2-season bubble pertaining their Big Brother experience, and Britney was still in that bubble. Fan was not only a fan favorite, but was seen at the time as one of the best winners ever from Big Brother 10. Rich was 4 years old and he was distanced from his Big Brother experience. At this point in time, he is still a part of the post-classic era, so he was still associated with this recent time, despite his season 4 years old. And both are seasoned and sensical choices, but the other two choices were wild. Kind of like a why the fuck were they casted? Especially since one, they're from an older era, and two, they already played twice beforehand. Both Janelle and Boogie at this point were long distanced from their Big Brother experience and whatever opportunities they could get from the show at this point. Since their last seasons, well, at least for Janelle, was 6 years. Actually, no, for both of them, their last seasons was 6 years ago and 7 seasons ago, and it's only just addressing their second season. And obviously, it's longer if I add it in their first seasons. Outside of that, their most recent season was a full returnee season. And usually with full returnee seasons, everyone kind of just goes back to their normal lives a lot quicker. We even saw this with the Big Brother 22 cast, and people just kind of move on quicker, since everyone kind of knew what they were getting into, with the fans and the alumni as well. If we look at their OG seasons, Janelle's OG season, Big Brother 6, was 7 years slash 8 seasons ago, and Mike Boogie's OG season was 11 years slash 12 seasons ago. Why did they cast two people who were on the show forever ago and already played twice? And I'm going to state it here. I think playing 2 times should be the maximum amount of time a Big Brother player should play, since once you get to the 3 time or the 4 times, they usually are shells of their former selves when it comes to gameplay and their personalities and what they could offer in the show. So it's really kind of just disappointing. So, in order to do this, we need to go over the newbies over the last several seasons, mainly this post classic era, especially up until the point of Big Brother 14 being conceptualized. So, it's clear that CBS and production didn't give a crap about the Big Brother 13 rookies, whose only purpose was to be fodder for the veterans. And even up till today, as I'm recording this, none of the rookies from Big Brother 13 have ever returned. And even with a lot of bad seasons, there's at least been one person who has returned. So clearly, they don't think highly of the Big Brother 13 rookies. For Big Brother 12, Britney did come back. So I'm assuming that Sorry. And I'm also assuming that they don't want 2 people back from that season. The only other options were the Brigade, but I don't think they were really notable as individuals, as it's the Brigade that's no, not really the members. Though Enzo obviously came back many years later, and there's no point in bringing back Brenchel when Rachel already won. They already came back twice, and Brennan didn't even want to be there the second time, so why bring him back for a third? So, regarding Big Brother 11, it was clear that CBS and production only really cared for Jeff and Jordan from that season, who already returned, and I don't recall anyone else from that season ever really coming back. Obviously, Kevin came back in All Stars, but that was a decade later, and I think they brought him back because they wanted more diversity. Regarding Big Brother 10, they did get Dan to return, and regarding the people who I thought production may have considered, i.e., Memphis and Keisha, they really weren't big priorities for production, and while they did return for Big Brother All Stars 2, which was a decade later, they were initially alternates who made it on because Casey and Josh dropped out, so I don't think production was ever really that high on Memphis and Keisha. And I don't think they care for anyone else from that season. Obviously, Jesse was an option, but I doubt that they would have wanted to bring him back after a second time, and I don't think they wanted more than one person from a season. Moving on to Big Brother 9, this is clearly a persona non grata season, and the one person who made an appearance in another season, i.e., Matt, ended up getting locked up, so even he wasn't an option anymore. And Big Brother 9 was clearly something that production saw as a mistake, so none of them are ever going to come back. So obviously, no options there. And with Big Brother 8, the few who did make cameos past that season, i.e., Jen, Eric, and Jessica, where Jessica had her option to return in Big Brother 11, and once that didn't happen, it was clear that it was kind of curtains for her. Overall, Big Brother 8 was 5 years and 6 seasons removed at this point, and CBS and production mainly cared for the Donatos, who already returned. So any other options from this season, clearly they were out of production and CBS's mind frame and point of view at this point. So with all that I kind of just described, especially regarding the people from the post-classic era, there really weren't many options. So it kind of rationalizes why they ended up going with Janelle and Mike Boogie here. Obviously, the main thing that is discussed regarding the Big Brother 14 veterans and their veteran privilege is the fact that the coach's twist really was a disguised way to give them 4 weeks of immunity. It turned into 3 weeks of immunity instead of four due to Willie's expulsion taking away a week. Kind of like how Dick being pulled from Big Brother 13 took away a week, where the Golden Key twist was initially supposed to last 4 weeks, but it turned into three. So things kind of flipped for both seasons regarding their twists being minimized by a week when that was not the intention. The purpose of the coach's twist was to have the returning players coach the newbies on their teams to be good players. But if all the new players on said team was booted, the coach would be as well. But that really was almost never going to happen. Either way, it was clear that the coach's twist was never supposed to last long in the season, and Yeah, it didn't. It was a quick pre-jury twist that gave the coaches enough room to infiltrate themselves with the cast and with the rookies. They get their ratings boost by keeping them around for at least a month, and they're put in the position where the rookies are supposed to idolize them, they're supposed to take their advice, they're supposed to want to work with them for the future. Though there was always scuttlebutt amongst the newbies that the veterans would eventually become their own players, especially since they were nomination key slots by their pictures. So they were very aware of what was to come. What I will say about this rookie group compared to the last one is that they wanted a newbie to win. So despite their adoration of the coaches and the returning players, they weren't going to let something like a Big Brother 13 happen again, with Rachel winning over Porsche. And we eventually see that come to fruition with Ian winning over Dan. I haven't seen this point mentioned on the online Big Brother streets, but one of the reasons why I think the coach's twist was handled in the way that it was handled is due to the fact that CBS wanted a 16-player cast, but they were struggling with the implementation of having 16 players on a season. So before this, the only time they did a 16-player cast was in Big Brother 9, and the pacing of that was utterly horrendous, since it was clearly too much for them to handle. So making the coaches as players immediately avoided that pacing issue that Big Brother 9 suffered with at that point in time in that season, and in this point of time in Big Brother's history. The main thing with these two seasons is that they stuck with the 10-week cycle, which was way too small for 16 house guests, and it explains why the season's length has been extended every season since the season, while also having a 16 to 17 house guest cast. So if you look from Big Brother 15 and onwards, it pretty much has the format where the seasons are at least 10 weeks long. Sorry, no, that's a lie. The seasons are at least 12 weeks long. Some are 13 weeks, some are 14 weeks, and they all have at least 16 players on it. And that really helped the pacing that they were struggling with on Big Brother 14 and Big Brother 9 in this regard. I mentioned in the prior three videos that returnees are seen as advisors, leaders, and guiders in the eyes of the new players in many different ways, but in the prior two seasons, they are house guests from the very beginning of the season, so on a superficial level, they were on an even playing ground and an even level. That was clearly not the case with Big Brother 14, where the coaches were not normal players and were in a position of leadership and authority for a month. With the coaches twist, it also forms teams, which is also a common theme in mixed seasons, which I will definitely get into more, especially with Big Brother 18, where it develops a cliquish mentality and an even stronger layer of reliance on the coach, even when the teams end and they still go to that coach or that returning player for guidance. Now it is time to talk about each of the coaches slash returning players and how they either had veteran privilege or they didn't have veteran privilege and kind of go through their experiences on the season. Janelle is the first returning player who was evicted in the season, so I will start with her first, since it's just easier to go on a chronological order. I found her journey to be an interesting contrast, especially compared to how she was viewed, received, and perceived on Big Brother 7, not just by the house guests, but the fans, and especially by production and the network. She was the biggest production the face of the show in the mid 2000s at that point, and she was the hottest thing ever. I'm not just or mainly focusing on her looks. I'm talking about how she was the biggest draw, everyone had her name in their mouth, so on and so forth. But 6 years passed since Big Brother All Stars. Janelle became a wife and a mother. She moved back to her hometown in Minnesota, though that's a state, but she moved back to where she lived before Big Brother and when she was a child. Her seasons were not fresh in the audience's mind or production's mind, and it wasn't in circulation of the recruits or new fans of the show, especially the Big Brother 14 newbies, which will be important especially pertaining her journey here. I mention that because when Boogie pushed his narrative of her being cutthroat as a player, and some of the others also pushed that too, they believed it because they never actually watched her seasons. So one of the reasons why her veteran privilege wasn't strong with her in this season is that her seasons were so old. So the newbies just had no idea who she was, and whatever accomplishments she had on those seasons really didn't matter to her. And because they didn't watch it, they didn't respect it. And they couldn't form their own opinions on her as a player based off of her past. Another reason why I think it didn't work for her is that Janelle never had a good social game. So, in addition to all of that stuff I mentioned, she was booted a week after becoming an actual player, and it wasn't like she was the same competition beast that she was in Big Brother 6 and especially in Big Brother 7. The person booted next on a chronological point of view is Mike Boogie. Like Janelle, his two seasons were forever ago by the time of Big Brother 14 taking place, but he was lucky slash smart enough to choose at least two players who actually knew who he was to be on his team and were a fan of his. And yes, I'm referring to Frank and Ian, where Janelle's team didn't really know who they were because most, if not all of them, were essentially recruits. Just due to this, he had more veteran privilege than Janelle, since his position as a coach was actually respected by the people on his team, and he used that privilege in his team as well, since they were fans of him and he used that fandom that they had of him to his advantage, which Janelle was not able to have just due to the lack of familiarity there. So there was the element that he wanted and thought that he would remain a coach all season, hence his votes to remain as a coach. And apparently, during the negotiation process, they promised him that he would be a coach all season. So when that didn't happen, he was pissed off. Of course, that didn't end up happening, where he was forced to become a player against his own will, and you could tell that a part of him was just immediately checked out, and he was very angry about it overall. Whatever privilege that he had as a coach on his team essentially went away once he was no longer a coach and had to be forced to be an individual player, where he had to interact with all of the other people and he had to play with all the other people that were newbies but were not on his team, where they didn't really know him from his past seasons and they weren't fans of his. So the coach's twist ending kind of just took away some of that privilege. One of the reasons for that comes from the fact that most of the other newbies that weren't on his team didn't watch his seasons, so there really wasn't any novelty there on their end. Another main reason for it not working out as well for Mike is because his social game just was not good this season. In the past, he had Will to rely on in this regard. But Mike was funnier in the past as well, so he could somewhat hold his own there. But that sense of humor just really wasn't present this season, and he mainly just spent his time talking crap with Frank. And speaking of that, he was very miserable on this season, and because of the fact that he was glued to Social Pride and Frank, it did him absolutely no favors. And he only lasted 3 weeks as an actual player once the culture's twist ended. Britney is an interesting case in this regard. She definitely had the most recency bias out of all the veterans, since her season was 2 years prior, i.e., Big Brother 12, compared to 4 years prior for Dan, 6 and 7, as well as 11 years for Janelle and Mike, respectively. So they were very familiar with her season, since I am pretty sure that Big Brother 12 was the go-to season in Sequester during this period and even during a lot of the seasons in the next era. So the rookies and most likely the recruits mainly would have watched her season. But also based on Britney's edit on Big Brother 12 regarding the episodes, her as a game player wasn't focused on, but to be honest, there really wasn't a whole lot there anyways. But on the edit, her humor and personality was mainly focused on, so no one really saw her as a threat. With all of this in mind, it really isn't shocking that she had the easiest time with the newbies as a player and on social grounds, and just integrating as a player and as a person with the newbies since she was very recent and she doesn't have any of the threatening labels that the other three veterans had as players. I think her being known but not seen as a threat, i.e., Dan, and aren't seen as ancient as well, i.e., Janelle and Mike Boogie, put her in a position where she had a lot of influence over them. But this ironically caused people, mainly the other veterans, to call her a mastermind where she had a lot of power over Shane, Ian. She even had a good relationship with Danielle, and she was cool with a lot of people throughout the house. And even with Frank, she was able to put up a good face. But all of this ended up coming back to her, but it only came back to her because of Dan's funeral. So it was Dan who had to take her out, not because of her veteran privilege really ending. And it was just a very wonky circumstance that's just very rare in Big Brother in general. So the final veteran on this season is Dan. So at this point in Big Brother history, Dan was not from a recent season, as it has been 4 years since his season, which was Big Brother 10. So he was definitely removed from the Big Brother alumni and experience at this point, but he was not on an ancient season like Janelle and Mike, where they were on seasons that weren't of this era. But because he, at this point, was seen as the best Big Brother player, let's be honest, he still kind of is seen as that today, but that's kind of just beside the point. CBS definitely promoted him being the best Big Brother player throughout the last 4 years. So, despite him not being on a recent season, he still had some name recognition, despite his season being 4 years old at the time. But I also think because his season was in this era specifically, he still had a bit of, I don't know if recency is the best word, but he wasn't branded as some relic, essentially. I also think a lot of his veteran privilege, where a decent amount of the newbies flocked to him, came from his actual career. I believe at this point in time in his life, he became an actual coach, so he used a lot of those skills in the game. Obviously, him being a coach in real life was great for him becoming a coach on Big Brother, where he used that to definitely groom Danielle to being the player that she needed to be. And he kind of continued that role with a lot of the other newbies and people as well once the culture's twist ended. But in general, he kind of just did the same strategy that he did in Big Brother 10, at least in the beginning, with throwing competitions, coming off as meek and weak. The only other instance that I recall that veteran privilege might have benefited him is I believe it was during the Pandora's box that was randomly put in on week 7, where there was it's not a golf ball, but there's like a veto ball that was put in like one of those game machines that you have to like pick out. It has been speculated that that was put in there specifically for Dan to find since they knew that he was in danger when Frank was HOH, and I could definitely see production pulling something like that off. But it kind of worked against him because despite all the moves he made to get to the end, he was never going to be rewarded or awarded the win due to him being a veteran and the newbies wanting an actual newbie to win the season, which, presuming they actually watched Big Brother 13, they wanted the season to be about them. So despite them doing essentially everything that the veterans wanted them to do throughout the season, they didn't want to reward a veteran. So Dan didn't win, and that's still controversial up till today, 12 years later. Alrighty, so that is it regarding my veteran slash returning player privilege video in Big Brother 14. I didn't have as much to say, especially compared to Big Brother 13, but this was enough, I guess. I guess it's just their way of kind of ending the post classic era or attempting to with saving more money on not making a full returning season and saving a lot less of a headache. But the ratings really weren't as strong as they were in Big Brother 13. I think one of the reasons for that is this was the year of the Olympics, and whenever Olympics happens, Big Brother and other shows, especially that air in the summer, just get smaller ratings. But this would be the start of the general decline in ratings of Big Brother that they never really recovered from. So it will take 4 years until we have another mixed season. But it is a completely different era when that happens. And there are certain things that, or certain formats and structures that change in between the four seasons that we'll definitely address there. Anyways, that is all. Thank you all for listening, watching, and I'll be back with something else soon. Bye!